Video game producer interview questions. You've just been assigned to build this game. What resources will you need? If you're interviewing for a job in the game industry, even if you're not going to be a game producer, often you're going to be asked the question, if you've just been assigned to build X game, and they give you an example, what resources will you need? This is a question that really goes not towards could you build a game yourself, not what skills do you have, but do you understand all of the parts that go into making a game? A lot of people think of games just in terms of the art or the engine or the story, and they can't see the whole picture. In order to be an effective member of a team, you've got to be able to see not just the part of the game you're working on, but the game in its entirety. So, two examples of games that have potential or might be two different contrasting types of games would be Duke Nukem Forever and Need for Speed. If you were asked what resources do you need to build Need for Speed, you'd say, I need an engine, I need somebody to work on the physics, I need digitization of the cars, I need somebody to create the levels and environment, somebody to create the textures for each of those environments, somebody to work on the licensing for each of the cars in the game, and somebody to sell the opportunities for advertising in the game. This is very different than working in Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem is a story game, more or less. So you need writers, voice actors. There's not likely officially licensed products like there is in a car game, so you don't need somebody to go out and license the cars that you're going to use. The physics are probably part of whichever engine you bought or are using. You probably aren't developing the physics engine specific to that game the way you might in Need for Speed. So you don't need as much emphasis on finding a person to do the physics unless you've decided that your game is going to be a physics game like Portal. You know, it's a first-person shooter, but it's really a physics game. So you have to answer the question that you're presented based on the specific needs of that type of game. Some aspects are going to be the same in every game. You're going to need the art people, the music people, the sound people. But where the emphasis is going to change is, are you focusing on the engine? Are you focusing on the story? Are you focusing on the gameplay? And do you need to have different modes? Do you need to have people to write the stories? All varies a little bit. But the real core of this question is, do you understand all of the parts? Can you enumerate all of the parts? And then can you justify why you needed more resources of a certain type than you would with the other type of game? You see this same kind of question in other industries, and sometimes you see the generic version of this question presented. At Microsoft, I know that they used to ask, so we've decided to go into the car and automotive manufacturing business. We'd like to release the Microsoft-powered car. Which things will we need? And a common failing would be you'd get all the way through and the person wouldn't have listed tires. So you would have built a car and it wouldn't have any tires to go anywhere. That's basically what interviewers will try and do with this question. They'll have you go through a whole bunch of things and look for the things that you forgot. So you need to be over compensating for that and over enumerate some of the stuff. You know, you'd say, oh, I'm doing Need for Speed, and because I'm doing a Need for Speed, I want great racing music, so I'm going to have a person who is going to spend time in LA signing hip new artists to create the soundtrack for my game. Whereas Duke Nukem, you maybe wouldn't do those things. And by going through and stepping through each of those things, you can create a compelling story for how you would attack a game and your understanding of what the specifics of that genre are and how the teams work. The second part of this question often becomes about the timeline for each of the steps. When you're working on a game like Need for Speed that doesn't have the story, you can work a little more in parallel, because somebody can be working on digitizing cars, knowing that these are the cars that are going to be in the game, while somebody else is working on the music, knowing that the game is going to be released at a certain date and those are what you're going to need. With a story like Duke Nukem, someone has to tell the story so that you can pick the environments that you're going to have, so that the artists can start working on each of those parts of the environment. If you are ever asked to say, you're going to pitch a game, which resources will you need? Pick something like a car game, because it's easier to tell tell how you do it without having to know the specific timeline. Unless, of course, you've worked in the game industry, in which case you probably don't need my help in answering this question, you just know how to do it.